If there's one thing that completely changes how you approach school, university, or even life in general, it's learning how to study effectively. Let's be honest, no one actually teaches us how to learn. We're just expected to figure it out. And most of us end up wasting hours and hours on things that feel productive, but don't really work. The good news? There's a ton of research out there, backed by science, that shows us exactly how to learn better and faster. These strategies can help you spend less time studying while getting much better results. I'll be showing you 5 of them to get you started, but there are many, many more. Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Bartol. I'm an Oxford graduate with a master's in mechanical engineering, and I've helped more than 100 students with their admission to university. I've seen everything you should and shouldn't do, and we'll be sharing some thoughts. In my life, I've never been solely committed to studying, and I've always had to juggle academics with training, tutoring, sailing, or just trying to spend as much time with family as possible, and that's the correct way of approaching things. You shouldn't want to spend all your time on academics, and so finding more efficient ways to study will help you live a more natural and healthy life. When I first started at Oxford, I struggled a lot. Most people do, highlighting, reading, summarizing, thinking that was the way to go. Spoiler, it really wasn't. I felt like I was working hard, but I wasn't seeing the results I wanted. But then I discovered something that changed everything. Watching Ali Abdaal, a medic from Cambridge, I found actual evidence-based ways to study smarter. I started applying these strategies, and not only did my grades improve, I suddenly had much more time to focus on what mattered to me. The best part of it, effective study doesn't mean locking yourself away and sacrificing your free time. It's about being strategic, making small but meaningful changes, and trusting the process. In this video, I'll share what worked for me and how you can apply it to your own studies. Let's get started. Technique 1, the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule. You've probably heard of the Pareto principle before, that 80% of your results come from 20% of the work. And this is the ultimate hack for focusing your energy and dealing with perfectionism. Instead of trying to master everything, figure out which topic areas give you the biggest payoff. For example, in exams, certain key concepts often make up the bulk of the questions, and spend most of your time mastering those. Let's dig into it with an example. Imagine you're preparing for a big maths exam. The syllabus feels endless. There's calculus, trigonometry, algebra, probability, geometry, you name it. And where do you even begin? Well, this is where the Pareto principle is your best friend. Start by analyzing the past papers or exam trends. You might notice something interesting. While the syllabus seems massive, most of the questions tend to focus on a few key areas, like calculus and algebra, for example. Let's say 60% of the marks consistently come from derivatives and integrals. This means that instead of trying to perfect every single topic, you should prioritize energy on these high impact areas first, so calculus. Spend 80% of your time drilling practice questions and mastering these, and then focus the rest of the energy on other lesser priority topics. Now, this doesn't mean ignore the rest of the syllabus entirely, but approach it differently. From the remaining topics, focus on achieving a solid understanding without over-committing time. Skim through the basics of probability and geometry to ensure you can tackle these questions if they come up, but let these take a backseat in your exams. This targeted approach turns a stressful, unfocused study session into something efficient and rewarding. Instead of cramming everything and feeling overwhelmed, you'll walk into the exam room with confidence, knowing that you've covered the most important ground. The same strategy applies beyond exams, preparing for your university applications, learning a new skill, or tackling a big project. Identifying and focusing on the tasks that deliver the biggest payoff is your ultimate energy hack. Technique 2, Parkinson's Law. Now, Parkinson's Law teaches us that if you give yourself a week to finish something, it'll take a week. But if you give yourself 3 days, you'll probably finish it in 3 days. So work expands to the amount of time that you give it. So set shorter, focused deadlines for your task. This forces you to cut the fluff and focus on what's actually important. When I was at Oxford, I had to juggle multiple deadlines all at the same time. Coursework, tutorials, extracurriculars like training, sports. If I'd let tasks drag on endlessly, I would have drowned in stress. Instead, I started using shorter, self-imposed deadlines. For example, if a paper was due in a week, I'd aim to finish it in 2 days. That gave me breathing room to revise or handle other responsibilities while staying ahead of schedule. And it didn't always take 2 days, it would usually take 4, but that's still less than 7. Here's the key to really get this to work. Be accountable. Make sure you actually stick to this. And how can you do this? The easiest way is just by telling someone that you will. Share it with a friend. And just by saying you will complete an essay by Wednesday, it brings the idea to life and makes sure that you stick to your word, because you don't want to be the slacker that always is late for the deadline. Put some social pressure on yourself. Technique 3, active recall. Now, active recall is a game changer for studying because it flips the tradition of passive methods on their head. Many of us spend hours rereading notes, highlighting key points, or copying things word for word, thinking we're being productive. The problem is that these methods don't challenge your brain enough to truly learn or retain information. Active recall, on the other hand, focuses your brain to retrieve information from memory. This strengthens neural pathways and makes information easier to recall later, whether it's an exam, an interview, or a real-world situation. For example, flashcards are a great tool. Write questions on one side and answers on the other, but don't just flip them over when you're unsure. Instead, spend a few seconds actively trying to recall the answers before checking. Apps like Anki work wonders for this and take out all the thinking behind it. But if you want to be analog on your calendar, if you're revising a topic, let's say vector calculus on Monday, revise it again in 1 day, then in 3 days, then in 5 days, then in 1.5 weeks, then in 3 weeks, etc. And by adding all of these to your calendar, by flicking to any day, you'll have a clear schedule of exactly what topics you need to revise for that day. And there you go, you've taken all the work out of it. This method counteracts the forgetting curve, the way we forget information over a period of time, and helps us revise information just as we're forgetting it, to start the curve again and again until the curve disappears and we have a constant memory of the things we've revised. Another great way to counteract this forgetting curve is to use the blank page method and write down everything you know on a given topic on a blank piece of paper and then add in bits. Then you have a physical record of how much information you've kept and what areas you need to study. Finally, past papers are a great way to notice patterns in the syllabus and the question making, and is a great way to test yourself on realistic questions. So active recall is probably the best way to learn and will really cut down your study time by focusing on things that move the needle the most. Technique 4, spaced repetition. As I've said, it's one of the most effective ways to commit information to knowledge. And instead of cramming information all at once, you review material, strategically increasing intervals over time. This approach combats the forgetting curve, a phenomenon where we lose information rapidly after first learning it, unless it's reinforced. So there's no thinking involved, you just start the process every day. Technique 5, the science of breaks. Work smarter, not harder. Research consistently highlights the importance of taking breaks to maintain focus and productivity, and techniques like the Pomodoro method, working 25 minutes followed by a 5-minute break, capitalize on this idea. By breaking work into manageable chunks, it prevents mental fatigue and keeps your brain fresh and encourages sustained effort over a long period of time. These short intervals of concentrated work followed by quick periods of rest can help you avoid burnout and remain engaged with your task. But once again, not all breaks are created equal. Scrolling on your phone or jumping into distractions like social media or tabs on Google can leave you feeling mentally drained and even more tired than when you started the break, even though it doesn't feel like this. So get up, stretch, hydrate, go for a walk, do something other than sitting down to let your brain completely reset. Let your blood flow, let the oxygen flow, and stimulate creativity. This makes it easier to dive back into work with renewed focus. I'd also suggest finding some productive distractions, like learning an instrument or learning a language, to help you in these breaks if you don't want to necessarily stretch or go for a walk. Having said this, there's a counter-argument to frequent breaks, which is the flow state. When you're fully immersed in a task and everything feels effortless, taking a break might disrupt the flow. Flow states often lead to peak performance because you're deeply engaged with your work, operating at the edge of your abilities. And breaking this concentration will take you out of the zone. forcing you to rebuild momentum when you come back in. Now, the key is to recognize when you're in a flow state versus when you're just grinding through passively. If you find yourself fully absorbed, skip the Pomodoro timer and ride the wave of productivity for as long as it lasts. Flow states are rare and incredibly valuable, so it's worth extending your work sessions when you hit that stride. On the other hand, if you notice your focus dwindling and slipping, your mind wandering, or your efficiency dropping, Pomodoro technique gives you the opportunity to take a break and help refocus your efforts. To balance both approaches, consider adapting the Pomodoro method based on your needs. Start with the classic 25-5 ratio, but give yourself the flexibility to extend your work sessions when you're fully engaged. By tuning your productivity patterns, you can strike a balance and begin to realize what works for you. So there you have it, 5 powerful strategies to transform the way you study. Remember, it's not always about working harder, it's about working smarter. Why don't you try 1 or 2 of these techniques this week and see how they fit your routine? If you found this video helpful, consider subscribing for more similar content, and let me know in the comments what strategies you use to keep your focus during study sessions. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.